Risk management for security. Introduction. Managing risk is one of the key responsibilities of every manager within the organization. In any well-developed risk management program, two formal processes are at work: risk identification and assessment, risk control. Overview of risk management. Risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and controlling threats to an organization's capital and earnings. These risks stem from a variety of sources, including financial uncertainties and legal liabilities, technology issues, strategic management errors, accidents, and natural disasters. Risk identification. Risk identification begins with the process of self-examination. Managers identify the organization information assets, classifies them into useful groups, and prioritize them by their approval importance. People, procedures, and data assets in the identification. Number one is name, second IP address, third is media access control address, element type, serial number, maker's name, manufacturer's model name, a number, software version, update version, revision, physical location, logical location, controlling entity. Unlike the tangible hardware and software elements already described, the human resources, documentation, and data information are accessed not as readily discovered and documented. These assets should be identified, described, and evaluated by people using knowledge and experience and judgment. As these elements are identified, they should also be recorded into some reliable data handling process. People, procedures, classification. Automated assets, inventory tools. Automated tools can be sometimes uncover system elements that make up the hardware, software, and network components. Once created, the inventory listing must be kept current to a tool that periodically refreshes the data. Data classification and management. Many organizations already have a classification scheme. Example of these kinds of classifications are confidential data, internal data, and external. Informal organizations may have to organize themselves to create a usable data classification model. The other side of data classification scheme as the personal security clearance structure. Feasible analysis. Organizational feasibility aims to assess the prowess of management and sufficiency of resources to bring a product or idea to market. Operational feasibility is the measure of how well a proposed system solves the problem and takes advantage of the opportunity identified during scope identification and how it satisfies the requirements identified in the requirements analysis phase on the system development. Technical feasibility is the process of figuring out how you're going to produce your product or service to determine whether it's possible for you from your company. What political feasibility is a measure of how well a solution of a policy problem will be accepted by the set of the decision makers and the general public. Risk determination. For the purpose of relative risk assessment, risk likelihood of vulnerability occurrence time value minus percentage risk already controlled plus an element of uncertainty. Vulnerability and identification. Vulnerabilities are specific avenues that threat agents can exploit to attack an information asset. Once you have identified the information asset of the organization and document some threat assessment criteria, you can begin to review every information asset for each threat. At the end of the risk identification process, a list of assets and their vulnerability has been developed. This list serves as starting point for the next step in the risk management process. The TVA Worksheet. At the end of risk identification process, a list of assets and their vulnerabilities has been developed. Another list prioritizes threats facing the organization based on the weight table discussed earlier. This list can be combined into a single worksheet. Identify possible controls for each threat and its associated vulnerabilities that have reducible Create a preliminary list of control ideas. Three general categories of control exist: policies, program, technical controls. Risk control strategies. An organization must choose one of the four basic strategies in control risk: avoidance, transference, and mitigation. Accept. Cost benefit analysis or CBA, the creation of common use when evaluation a project that implements information security controls and safeguard its economic feasibility. Organizations are urged to begin a cost of benefit analysis by evaluating the worth of the information assets to protected and the loss in value if those information assets are compromised. The decision-making process is called a cost-benefit analysis or an economic feasibility study. Benefit. Benefit is the value to the organization of using controls to prevent losses associated with a specific vulnerability. This is expressed as the annualized loss expectancy. As a valuation. Asset valuation is a process of assigning financial value or worth to each information asset. The value of information differs within organization and between organized based on the characteristics of information and the perceived value of that information. The cost-benefit analysis formula. CBA determines whether or not controlled alternative is worth its associated cost. CBAs may be calculated before a control or safeguard is implemented to determine if the control is worth implementing or calculated after controls has been implemented and have been functioning for a time. Benchmarking and best practices. Benchmarking is seeking out the study and practices from other organizations that produce the results desired and then measure and differences between the way that organization conduct business. In the field of information security, two categories of benchmarking are used: standard of due care and due diligent best practices. Baselining is the analysis of measures against established standards. Information security baselining is the comparison of security activities and events against the organization's future performance. The information gathered for an organization's first risk assessment becomes the baseline for future comparison. Documenting results. When the risk management program of an organization has been completed, the result is that a series of proposed controls are prepared, each of which is justified by one or more feasibility or rationalization approaches. At a minimum, at a minimum, each information asset threats pair should have a documented control strategy that clearly identifies any reducible risk remain after a proposed strategy has been executed. Thank you for listening.